Hey everybody, when it comes to sleeping in the great outdoors, the sleeping bag has been a staple for so many years. Quilts are starting to make a big splash with the hiking and camping world, but most people are familiar with sleeping bags, but not so with quilts. In this episode, we're going to look at the difference between both and the pros and cons, and depending on the seasons, the conditions, or the situation, we're going to find out which one would work best for you. First, let's look at the sleeping bag. The sleeping bag is such an effective insulator, in large part due to their draft-free design that fully encloses the body, including the head, keeping the air and cold air out. Traditional backpacking sleeping bags have a mummy shape, meaning that they are wide around the shoulder and taper down around the feet. A hood covers the head. A zipper running down the side opens up so you can enter and exit the bag. Some modern ultralight sleeping bags eliminates the hood and shorten the zipper to save weight. The sleeping bag / quilt hybrids can zip all the way down and are able to open up like a blanket. Now the quilt, which builds on the idea that the down on the underside of your bag does not offer much in the way of insulation. Now let me explain. In your sleeping bag you'll have chambers and there'll be down filled in there. Down insulates by trapping warm air in the chambers of your sleeping bag. The higher the chambers, the loft, the warmer the sleeping bag. So when you get in the sleeping bag, those chambers that are loft with down underneath you will now be completely flattened by your body weight. There's no loft to trap the warm air, which will lead you to have your top warm, but underneath you freezing. The quilt removes a hood in the back, but not the foot box from a traditional mummy bag. A camping quilt is essentially a sleeping bag with all the unnecessary parts removed. The goal of this design is to make it as lightweight and compact as possible. Quilts cut weight and bulk by eliminating the unnecessary down and fabric from the underside of the bag. Instead of wrapping around your body, the quilt is simply left open underneath so that you can lie directly on the sleeping pad, or if you're using a hammock, an underquilt underneath you. With the quilt draped over the top of you, it only provides insulation on the top and the sides of your body. Your sleeping pad insulates you from the ground in a tent, or an underquilt in a hammock. A majority of designs come with a pad attachments to create a closed system around your sleeping pad. Many, though not all quilts, have a rear closures that allow you to secure them around you like a sleeping bag. Especially useful if you're not pairing your quilt with a pad. Some quilts have a sewn foot box, and some have foot boxes that close shut with a zipper or snaps, and may have a bottom drawstring. This gives you the versatility of using the quilt as a blanket or a comforter. The problem with these, there may be a small hole on the end of the foot box that could let a draft in. Some come with a small baffle to plug that opening. The top quilt will have a snap-on with some type of drawstring to secure around the shoulder and the neck to stop a draft. Now the pros with the quilt. They don't take long to reloft like a sleeping bag, and this could be a big deal if you've been hiking all day till nighttime and just want to go to sleep right away. They also have no zipper to snag on loose material or to worry about breaking. Quilts provide greater freedom of movement, particularly if you're a side sleeper, and less moisture with your head outside instead of inside. There's less chance your bag will be compromised by moisture buildup from respiration. A negative with quilts is drafts, which could be a positive when regulating heat, even in extreme cold temperatures like 38 below Fahrenheit and Celsius. It is necessary to regulate that heat. You never want to be wet with sweat in those temperatures. When your body cools down and you're wet, you can be in big trouble. Instead of having a hood when the temperatures drop, you would use a hat, balaclava, or a down hood to protect the head from the cold. And if the sides ain't tucked in, you may experience a draft. But a positive is during the hot weather, you can open it up to regulate heat, but in cold weather, you can wrap it around you at camp to keep you nice and warm. Now for the sleeping bag. You can use a sleeping bag with a hammock, but you have to remember when you get in the sleeping bag, in the hammock, the insulation underneath you will be flattened and there'll be no loft and it'll provide no or little insulation. And also getting in and out of them can be a challenge when using a hammock. You can either stand up and wiggle in, or lie down in the open bag and wiggle in. But the best way is to zip the bottom of the bag up 18 inches, flip upside down, and use as a top quilt. Now for extreme cold temperatures, I'll use my 25-degree sleeping bag and put my top quilt inside it. Instead of buying multiple quilts or sleeping bag, this is an inexpensive way to beat the sub-zero temperatures. The main difference between a sleeping bag and a quilt is a sleeping bag wraps completely around your body instead of just draped on top. In this way, you're completely surrounded by insulation on all sides. Even the head has a hood to protect it. This fully enclosed system holds warm air in and prevents drafts. During a cold night, it is hard to beat the heat retention of a cinch bag and hood that is draft-free to make a full cocoon and easy to use. You just climb in and zip up. Unlike a quilt where you have to tuck in the sides underneath you and snap the top closure and draw in around your neck. All of this must be done to stop a draft from coming in. Now when it comes to using a hammock, a top quilt works great with an underquilt underneath you. You can't beat the warmth and the comfort of this combo. And like I said earlier, you can use a sleeping bag as a top quilt with a hammock. For weight and packability, the ultralight enthusiasts and gram weenies are always looking for a way to shave off weight and bulk from their pack. And the sleeping bag is an obvious target. With less material, no hood or zipper, you can drop those unwanted grams. In general, quilts are not only lighter, in most cases 20 to 30%, but better packability. With all that being said, I'd like to share with you a simplified way where one works better than the other. During those hot days and night when sleeping in a tent, a comforter or quilt is much more comfortable than a sleeping bag. Instead of being constricted in a mummy bag and sweating away, like I said earlier, you can open the comforter and regulate the heat. But when the temperatures get colder, especially hiking up to higher elevations, this is where the sleeping bag shines. You never have to worry about drafts, even if you're twisting and turning all night. Now as hammocks are becoming more popular, and if I had to choose between a hammock and a tent, I'm always going to choose a hammock if possible. When using a pad or air mattress in a hammock, a sleeping bag may be a little more effective, but when having an underquilt underneath you, I will always use a top quilt. I even use them in my hammock during those cold winter months, and I will stay nice and toasty warm. Now when someone's starting out and they're thinking about tent camping and hammock camping, I know the question is going to be, Marine, which one should I buy? And I highly recommend buying a sleeping bag, even though they're bulkier and heavier. And that's because they work so great in tents. And then when you want to use them for a hammock, you can convert them into a top quilt. And if you really get into hammock camping, then you can invest in a top quilt. Now when having a sleeping bag and a top quilt, They work great as a tag team for the four season. Plus, like I said earlier, you can put them together during those extreme cold temperatures. Now, I hope you found this video to be helpful and insightful. And if you have any questions, please write them down below. I'd love to hear from you. This is the Marine. Thank you for watching, and God bless.
Appalachian sunrise meets my skin. Even with my eyes still closed,